In the last couple of videos, we looked at adding code quality checks to our code base to avoid things like styling issues or type checking errors. And while those can be good to maintain consistency and quality in our code, they do leave gaps in functionality or logic that can happen in our functions. So let's look at how to catch those errors today with testing. So over here in my project, I have a file with a bunch of utilities that I can use in my project. And we'll see what our previous setup got us working with. So we can say something like get type and execute that function. And we can see that we get some little red squigglies, and that's coming from TypeScript because it's going to tell us that, hey, get type is actually expecting some sort of value. So we'll just pass in the number 3. And then we get another little red squiggly. The big one goes away, but the other red squiggly shows us that, hey, we're missing a semicolon and a return character. And now that's fine. That got us all of the style and the static analysis checking that we wanted. But there's one problem. It doesn't tell us whether get type actually functions the way that it's supposed to. For example, it's supposed to return the string of the type of the object that we pass in. But if we keep that function there how we had it, and we just say that it's going to return an empty string, neither ESLint or TypeScript are going to catch that logical error. So we have a bug in our code. And we can avoid these sort of errors by writing tests that check our code, and we can run it every time we make changes to our code to enforce that we know that we didn't break anything. So let's look how we're going to do that. Today we're going to be adding testing to our project using Vitest. So we can say npm install Vitest, and we can go in package.json, and we can see that we can add a script to our package called test, and it's just going to execute Vitest. And we also need to add a test file to our project. Now I like to name mine with the name of the file that I'm going to be testing, and then .test.js. So I'm writing the test files, the test case for this utils file, and I'm importing get type. So really what my test should probably look like is to make sure that get type does what it's intended to do. So I'm just going to type this really quick, and then we can look at it when I'm done. Okay, so I've written out a nice test suite that creates 2 test blocks and tells me what this test is expecting. So I have a suite of tests for the utils file, and then a suite of tests specifically for the get type function. And in that function, I have one test runner that is making a bunch of assertions on the input and the output. Now this is a fairly simple function, so I can just do those in line. And I can pass in a string, a number, null, undefined, object, array, and a function. And I can make assertions on those values to come back as expected. So let's see what this test looks like when we run it. Okay, so it took a few seconds, and we have 1 out of 1 test passing. That's really handy. And we'll also see that this is waiting for a file change. So we can actually write another test and say, what happens if we pass in an array and we expect maybe a typo in our test? We expect a number. Then our test is going to run again, and we're going to see that our tests have failed. So breaking tests is not particularly helpful. It's more interesting if we accidentally make a change to our project, and maybe instead of to lowercase, we change some of the functionality, and we see that our tests tell us, hey, I was expecting to get the string of lowercase string, and I received uppercase string. And that's because we broke some functionality. So we can bring that back, fix our tests, see that they all passed, and that can give us a lot of confidence when we make changes in our code base that we don't break existing functionality. And once again, as part of this code quality series, it's only so helpful if we run this locally. Where this really shines is if we're working on a team and we can run these checks in our code base as PRs are merged into certain branches, and we can prevent certain automation steps from happening, like a CI/CD pipeline that deploys to production. We may want to run this check and prevent a push to production if this test fails. If we need to, Vitest actually has another option where you can pass a just run flag, and it can run through once without having that watcher going all the time. So if this fails, it will prevent any code from going to production, and if it passes, it can go ahead and send that along. So once again, I hope that you found this sort of thing useful. If you did, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions or want me to cover any other sort of web development topics, leave them in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as I can.